8 million children. That is the number of German children who joined the Hitler Youth by 1945.
Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
8 million common children who began in what seemed to be Boy Scouts and finished up as child soldiers on the battlefields within Europe. Everyone believes that they are already familiar with this story. Kids are brainwashed by evil dictators. Bad things do happen. The end. However, the true story is even more horrifying, as it points to something in the nature of man which we do not care to appreciate. Any child in any nation, given the right conditions, can be developed into a weapon. Hitler Youth did not start with violence. It started with something all parents pray to God to give their child: a sense of belonging, meaning, and the potential that their child will not turn out to be nothing. What they did next redefined the history of man. It does not matter how it ends. The question is how it started. The perfect bait. Germany, 1922.
Und ihr, meine Jugend, soll dieses Volk nun werden.
The nation was dismantled, not only in economic terms, psychologically. Human beings were dying of hunger. Parents were unable to keep food on the table. Children saw that parents failed in everything. The majority of politicians attempted to appeal to adults, but Hitler had a better plan in mind, a more hazardous thought. He needed the children. Consider it. Grown-ups have views. They argue. They ask questions. But kids? Youngsters are blank slates. Hungry hearts of heroes. They accept what you tell them. They desire to be part of something that is cool. The initial group began with small numbers. In Bavaria, only a handful of teens. They refer to themselves as the Nazis' Youth League. But these children did not find it boring. And here is what you must know about evil. When it begins, it never seems evil. It appears so good as an opportunity. It has the appearance of belonging. These were not the very bad kids. These frequently were the good ones. The ones who did as they were told, who wanted their parents to be proud of them. Nazi transporters recruited children belonging to disciplined, loyal, and service-oriented families especially. They were issued uniforms, which made them appear significant. They took camping expeditions, which were like an adventure. They were taught how to be soldiers as they marched, and this aspect gave them strength. Gradually, very gradually, they began to think they were special, that they were selected. They were going to be saving Germany. These groups were operated by the adults, who were very clever manipulators. They did not begin with the frightening material. No discussion about killing or war, just friendship, adventure. Proud to be German. It operated just like a summer camp. Children would go hiking into the forest, learn survival skills, and play sports. However, all their songs were full of subtle connotations of racial purity, and each campfire tale had woven into it an inkling of hate, beautifully painful in the magnificence of the heroic tale. Every march practiced the discipline they'd need later for real war. By 1923, hundreds of kids had joined. They came from poor families mostly. Kids who felt forgotten. Kids who wanted to matter. The Nazi youth gave them exactly what they craved, a place to belong. Hitler knew something the parents didn't. Give me a child's heart, he thought, and I'll give you the future. From Underground to Unstoppable, November 1923. Hitler tried to take over the government. He failed. Got arrested. The Nazi Party was banned. Game over, right? Wrong. The youth groups became underground, and this made them further irresistible. They altered the names, secretly met, distinguished themselves as hiking clubs. They never gave up recruiting. This excited the teenagers even more. They were now rebels, freedom fighters. Nothing is more attractive to the young person than being a participant in something forbidden. After Hitler was released from prison in 1924, winning elections was not his priority. That was reconstituting his army of children. He renamed them Hitler Jugend in 1926. Hitler Youth. Not the Nazi Youth. Not German Youth. Hitler Youth. Now one man would be the object of their allegiance. In 1931, it was succeeded by Baldur von Schirach. The point is, he knew something, he was barely 24, that would make your blood run cold. Children want to be told what to think, but they want to be persuaded they are thinking it out themselves. He transformed the loose bands into a military machine. Everyone was ranked, all of them were put in uniforms, each had their employment, which made them feel needed. Hitler Youth did not say to children that their parents were mistaken. They devised conditions that children would draw that conclusion by themselves. They never stated that the Jews were evil. They devised games and exercises with the help of which children would see to it with their own eyes. At the time when Hitler became a chancellor in 1933, they had 100,000 members. Hitler desired even more, though, much more. He aspired to do it with each and every German kid. No choice left. June 1933. Hitler had already 5 months in power. Now it was time to open his hand. Bang! All other youth groups in Germany were banned overnight. Boy Scouts, illegal. Church groups, shut down. Jewish youngsters' organizations, gone. One morning, parents woke up to find that their children had no other choice but to join the Hitler Youth or turn into outcasts. Most kids celebrated. But here is what is scary about this. They were not being pushed into anything they despised, but getting near what they desired. Initially, they faked that it was voluntary. But how do you say that to a 12-year-old and see him watch his friends all march off in their uniforms and leave him sitting alone at home? By 1936, they no longer pretended. New legislation. All Aryan children ages 10 to 18 will be required to become members. By 1939, you went to jail unless you enrolled your child. 9 million children. This was the number they controlled by the onset of World War II. Practically all the children in Germany. The ironic part is that the majority of the families did not fight back. Their children sought to be allowed to join. The children went home happy, enthusiastic, and driven. Parents observed the results of positive changes in the behavior of their children, self-confidence, and sense of direction. But school was no longer about learning. It turned into obedience. Math questions. How much money would Germany save by killing 10,000 mentally ill individuals when the day-to-day running costs 4 marks? History made them believe that Germans were the superior race. The Jews were evil parasites. The art class made them know what paintings were considered to be degenerate. Even the gym was made for military training. All the topics affirmed the Nazi Weltanschauung. No neutral ground, nothing to escape. The children were brought up not to think individually. They were taught how to think precisely what Hitler wanted them to consider. And it worked. God help us, it worked. Turning children into spies. Now comes the part to make your blood curdle. Hitler Youth made children spy on their parents. Children were conditioned that Hitler was their real father, and this was because the biological parents acted as the interim parents, whose conservative ideas could be detrimental to their growth. Consider the psychological implications of such a message. The young leaders were taught to listen during dinners, to listen when mom and dad discussed the politics, to observe whether Hitler was criticized by anybody. And what would they suspect? Report it, immediately. Children were taught that they were loyal to Hitler first before they loved their parents. Being a good German did not mean not betraying your family. Walter Kempowski was 10 years old when he denounced his father because he listened to British radio. He believed that he was acting as a good German. Tonight, his father was arrested by the Gestapo. 6 months in a concentration camp on an enemy propaganda understanding. Walter has never realized why, since then, the family dinners have never been the same. Try to imagine you are a parent living in Nazi Germany. One cannot trust their children. It is impossible to talk freely at home. Each one of your words could ruin your family. The dining table turned into a war field. Parents were attempting to retain their ideals even as they remained safe. Kids who have to choose between family and duty and the new world full of adventure that they were shipped out to see. The children were sincere in their motives for doing this to their families because they were trying to change their wrong way of thinking. They would disagree with parents when it comes to politics and deny being a part of family practices that were in conflict with Nazi ideology. These were not rebellious acts. It was a show of love and loyalty as it was taught to the children. The Nazis destroyed the relationship between the parents and children. They made children between the family and the state, and millions of children voted for the state.
The camps where souls were broken. Every weekend, every school holiday, millions of German children were loaded onto trains. Destination: camps scattered across Germany's forests. Parents were informed that the kids were going to acquire outdoor skills: camping, hiking, character building. And they lied. These were not summer camps. These were mental factories in which typical children were brought to be made into Nazi robots. Your question is, how to brainwash a child. The manual was written by the Nazis. You isolate them first. These camps were isolated, where the family would not have much influence. Children existed in one another all the time. The community made themselves their world. Second, you burn them out. This began at dawn. Whistles blowing, military-style everything. They walked miles carrying bulky backpacks. Sleep was a luxury. One night, 4 hours. The next, 6. Children who have had their fill of food and are feeling the need to sleep are easy to get under control. Third, you produce false attachment. The tribulations which were shared as a collective, the challenges as general groups, and rituals and rites in which children took oaths of allegiance to Hitler. This is psychological warfare meant to ensure an emotional connection that cannot be broken. Fourth, you progressively increase demands. Children anticipating adventure in the outdoors are gradually conditioned to radical thought. And by the time they discovered how far they had moved, they were wrongly invested in the journey. But that was only training in the physical. It was actually evening sessions that were destructive. Speeches, hours of speeches, chanting, repetition. Youngsters learnt Nazism slogans, such that they could chant during sleep. They also viewed movies that portrayed the Jews as monsters. They were told of Nazi martyrs. It was instilled into them that dying by Hitler was the greatest privilege. Any child who questioned was punished, isolated. Examples were made of. Week after week, night after night, the young brains were pounded with the same things. Germans are better. Races other than ours are inferior. Hitler is ideal. There is a need of violence. Death is magnificent. As kids began going home, they were not the same. Harder, more distant. Their parents saw, but they did not comprehend what had occurred. Their children were happy before, and the camps had taken their souls and changed them into Nazi training.
Girls and the baby-making machine. The girls were subjected to equally perverted training since the boys got twisted in by joining the army. Among the main teachings of the League of German Girls was the fact that it was your responsibility to have children. Pure Aryan offspring of the Reich. Forget careers, forget education, forget dreams. German girls were there to bear the sons of the master race. The worst of them was the program of Lebensborn. According to historical data, SS officers were advised to have children with those women who were chosen out of racial peculiarities. According to the documentation, women of different ages were among the participants. There were no marriages. They were programs arranged by the state.
It was the duty of the women to be mothers, as they were informed that this was a patriotic act. They stayed in special facilities where interaction with SS officers led to pregnancies that were used by the Reich. When they delivered, most mothers lost their babies permanently. The children were transferred to Nazi schools. No connection was maintained between the birth mothers. Maria Reborn is reported to have been taken to a Lebensborn facility when she was still a young lady. She gave birth to a son whose father was an SS official with whom she barely knew. The baby was instantly sent away. She did not manage to find out where he was. Decades after the war, she tried to search for him. She never had a chance to meet her child again and passed away, leaving no resolution. Women of Germany were the objects of Nazi demographic policy. The reproduction of their lives was controlled by the state. Their children were in the ideology of Hitler, and they had been trained to see this as their most important contribution. Children at war. September 1939. Poland was invaded by Germany. World War II broke out. The Hitler Youth all of a sudden ceased to play. It was young boys who had spent days practicing war who now found themselves in real battles with real bullets. Initially, they labored behind the lines. However, the Nazis were desperate as the war took a bad turn for Germany. By the year 1943, they were deploying children in combat troops. The 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, consisted virtually of teenage boys. Others were as young as 16. It was what they had practiced their lives. Such child soldiers were frightening. Their death caused them no fear, as they had been brainwashed that once they died fighting on behalf of Hitler, they were bound to greatness. They would not be merciful, since they had been brought up to think enemies were subhuman creatures. Hitler Youth soldiers awe-inspired experienced Allied soldiers with their fanatical battle in the battles following D-Day. They did not hesitate to kill prisoners. Instead of surrendering, they fought to the death. They were children, nevertheless, and children have little chance to survive in real combat. Thousands died, blasted out of the way by cannon shot, smashed under tanks. Flaun was shot down as he rushed to the locations of machine guns. At the Battle of Cannes, 17-year-old Hans Munze was killed. In his final letter, he wrote home, "I am happy to die on behalf of the Führer. Prepare my little sister when she must come. Her time will come." And his sister was 12 years old. A generation of children was reared to embrace death by the Hitler Youth, and back to death welcomed them. The final madness. April 1945. Berlin was encircled. Soviet guns beat the city up. The Nazi state was falling. However, Hitler was still playing with children in his underground bunker. The camera of the newsreels enjoyed the surreal image, the future looking weak and ill. The Führer adorned the vestments of boys who appeared to be students of the private middle school. He trembled all over as he slapped their faces and spoke to them that they were the last resort of Germany. Anti-tank weapons were provided to these children, and they were instructed to halt this huge Soviet army. 12-year-olds with grenades, rocket launchers in the hands of 14-year-olds. Well, they have at it. As Berlin was coming to its end, the members of Hitler Youth were crawling in the streets full of rubble and tracking down the enemy tanks. There was no hope, they knew. They were aware of the fact that they were to die. They were so indoctrinated, however, that it was virtually out of the question to submit. At the age of 13, Alfred Czech was discovered by the soldiers of the Soviet Union in a building that was bombed. He was nearly as tall as a rifle. On being informed by the Soviets that the war was finished, he failed to believe them. When they reported Hitler to be dead, he considered them liars. Weeks have passed, and he has come to the realization that all that he was taught was false. Even when their Führer committed suicide, the children of the Hitler Youth continued to fight on. They were brainwashed so much that they could not be shaken by reality. They were the Nazi survivors, And these were only children. After the nightmare, May 1945. Germany surrendered. The war was over. But what do you do with 9 million children who have been raised to be fanatics? Just think of what it would be like to refashion your whole conception of reality. All you thought was false. All your heroes, whom you idolized, were criminals. All those sacrifices were futile. Allied forces did everything. There were films of concentration camps shown. They got psychiatrists. They established schools to enlighten them on democracy. The other children became adjusted. They were still too young to acquire new principles. However, there were those incapable of forgetting. During their childhood, they had believed what Hitler had promised them. By acknowledging that they were in the wrong, they would mean they had wasted the entire course of their lives. Quite a number of them sank into depression. Some even committed suicide, not wanting to confront reality. Some took as many as decades to live in denial, sticking to their Nazi ideologies. Ingrid Müller was a teenager of 16 years by the time the war was over. She had belonged to the League of German Girls 6 years, and during this time she was thoroughly persuaded the Jews were bad and Germans were to conquer the world. She had fainted when it was the first time that she heard about the Holocaust and met a Jewish survivor. In one dialogue, she fell flat on her whole picture of the world. It was only 20 years of treatment that allowed her to reconstruct her notion of right and wrong. Hitler Youth children had been deprived of more than their innocence. Their power to discriminate between a true and a false statement was stolen. Evil versus good, reality versus fantasy. At least some never recovered. Still others took the same attitude toward extremism and decided that at no cost could anything like the Hitler Youth ever happen again. But all of them were scared. All of them had to live with the knowledge that they had been turned into weapons against their own humanity. The warning. Hitler Youth began with uniforms and camping. It came to a close with the deaths of children and to dreams of a madman. How did it get to that? How did normal German families allow their children to be kidnapped and bent? It did not occur overnight. It crept along, little, by only a few concessions at a time. To begin with, they joined to appear exciting and free. Then they had made not joining sound unpatriotic. And then they criminalized not going. They imparted first the sense of pride in German heritage, then they imparted to them the superiority of the Germans, and then they preached that other races were worthy to die. To begin with, they promoted respect for authority, then they insisted upon dogmatism, then they pitted children against their parents. This was not the case since the Germans were not naturally evil. It was due to the fact that extremists were aware of manipulating human psychology. The way to assure fear and pride and the wish to fit in. It occurred because good people were too silent for too long, since they believed that it would be a blowover. They did not like making trouble. Hitler Youth was not only the historic exception, it was the model, a manual on how to weaponize childhood, how to turn love into hate. These practices can be found reflected today in extremist groups organizing over the internet, authoritarian regimes profiling schools to enforce their will, and likewise commercial organizations employing psychology and mind manipulation to sway the minds of youth. The Hitler Youth can teach us a lesson. What happens when our attention is gone? When we allow extremists around our schools and children? When we believe that it could not happen here? This is because it may occur here. It may occur anywhere. The only question is whether we'll recognize the warning signs before it's too late. 9 million kids. So many young lives had been ruined by the Hitler Youth. Others were killed in war. Some went off with mental wounds that never recovered. Their childhood was deprived of all of them. The kids that paraded in those perfect lines were not born to be monsters. Adults created weapons out of them, who fully knew what they were doing.
We commemorate their memory today not by forgetting what took place, but by remaining alert, by shielding our children against people who are only out to mislead their minds into hatred. Remembering the cost of freedom, the courage to speak up when we see the warning signs. Urban legends are urban legends, refusing to obey blindly when leaders require. To be able to love instead of hating, and hate appears simpler. In Nazi Germany, the lives of children were not given that option. Nevertheless, we do. We should not allow their sacrifice to have gone to waste.